The disappearing roommate Sarah had always dreamed of living in the city. The hustle and bustle, the bright lights, and endless opportunities called to her. So when she landed her dream job at a design firm, she knew it was time to leave her small hometown behind. She packed her belongings, said emotional goodbyes to her family and friends, and set out to start her new life. Finding an affordable apartment in the city, though, turned out to be harder than she expected. Sarah spent hours scrolling through apartment listings online. Most of them were either too expensive or located in neighborhoods that made her feel uneasy. Just as she was starting to lose hope, she stumbled upon a promising ad on Craigslist. The listing described a cozy two-bedroom apartment with utilities included. The pictures showed a clean, bright space with wooden floors, a small but functional kitchen, and a comfortable living room. The best part: the rent was within her budget. It almost seemed too good to be true. Sarah immediately contacted the poster, a woman named Emma, and arranged to visit the apartment. When Sarah arrived, Emma greeted her with a warm smile. She was a petite woman in her late 20s with short brown hair and a friendly demeanor. Emma explained that she had been living in the apartment for a while and was looking for a roommate to help share the costs. She mentioned that she traveled often for work, so Sarah would have the place to herself most of the time. The tour went smoothly, and Sarah instantly felt at ease. Emma seemed trustworthy, and the apartment was as nice as it looked in the photos. Without hesitation, Sarah signed the lease. She was thrilled to have found a place so quickly and couldn't wait to settle in. Moving day came, and everything went smoothly. Emma even helped Sarah carry some of her heavier boxes up the stairs. Over the next few days, Sarah unpacked, arranged her furniture, and made the apartment feel like home. At first, everything was perfect. The neighborhood was quiet, the apartment was clean, and Emma was, as promised, hardly ever around. Sarah enjoyed the solitude and used her free time to explore the city, learn her new job, and adjust to her new life. She felt lucky to have landed in such a good situation. But then, strange things began happening. It started small. Sarah would come home from work and find her belongings slightly out of place. At first, she thought she might be imagining things. Maybe she had left her book on the coffee table instead of the nightstand. Maybe she had forgotten to close a cupboard door. It wasn't until she noticed her favorite sweater folded neatly on the couch, a sweater she hadn't worn or touched in weeks, that she began to feel uneasy. Things escalated when she noticed signs that someone had been using the bathroom while she was at work. The mirror would have streaks of condensation, as if someone had just taken a hot shower. Once, she found a wet towel draped over the shower rod that wasn't hers. Emma was supposed to be out of town, so who could it have been? Sarah tried to brush off her concerns. Maybe Emma had come back briefly and hadn't mentioned it. Or maybe Sarah was simply overthinking. But as the days went by, her uneasiness grew. She began double-checking that she locked the door every time she left the apartment. She even started keeping a small pepper spray canister in her bag, just in case. One night, Sarah was jolted awake by a loud creaking sound. She sat up in bed, her heart pounding, and strained to listen. The noise seemed to be coming from the living room. Taking a deep breath, she grabbed her phone and tiptoed out of her bedroom. The apartment was dark, but she could make out the faint outline of someone sitting on the couch. "Emma?" Sarah whispered. There was no response. As she stepped closer, she saw that it was indeed Emma, sitting stiffly on the couch, staring blankly at the wall. Her eyes were wide, and her hands rested limply in her lap. She didn't blink or move, even when Sarah called her name again. After a few moments of eerie silence, Emma suddenly stood up, walked past Sarah without a word, and went into her bedroom, closing the door behind her. Sarah stood frozen, trying to make sense of what she had just seen. Was Emma sleepwalking? Or was something else going on? The next morning, Emma acted as if nothing had happened. She greeted Sarah cheerfully and mentioned she had an early meeting to attend. Sarah wanted to bring up the strange incident from the night before, but decided against it. She didn't want to seem paranoid or intrusive. A week later, Emma announced that she was moving out. She gave no clear reason, simply stating that she had found a new place closer to her work. Sarah was surprised, but didn't push for details. Emma packed her things quickly and left within a few days. After she was gone, Sarah felt a mix of relief and lingering unease. The apartment was now entirely hers, but it no longer felt as welcoming as it once had. While cleaning out Emma's room, Sarah discovered something strange. In the back of the closet, behind a pile of old boxes, was a small, hidden door. It was barely noticeable and painted the same color as the wall. Curiosity got the better of her, and she pried it open. Behind the door was a narrow, dark space filled with random belongings: old clothes, broken electronics, and stacks of photographs. As Sarah sifted through the items, she noticed that the photos were of different people. Some showed young men and women smiling in the apartment, their faces full of life. Others were blurry or taken from odd angles, as if snapped without the subjects knowing. The more she looked, the more unsettled she felt. Who were these people? And why were their belongings hidden here? Terrified, Sarah contacted the landlord. When she described what she had found, the landlord's tone turned serious. He explained that no one named Emma was listed on the lease. In fact, the apartment's previous tenant had vanished months ago, leaving behind no trace. The landlord had assumed the tenant had simply moved out without notice, but now he wasn't so sure. Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. Who had Emma really been? And what had happened to the original tenant? She didn't wait to find out. Within days, she packed her belongings and moved out, leaving the apartment and its mysteries behind. Even after she settled into a new place, she couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. The questions about Emma and the hidden room lingered in her mind, haunting her long after she'd left the city. Sarah's experience became a story she only shared with close friends, a chilling reminder that not everything or everyone is as they seem. The free couch Tom had been dreaming of living on his own for years. Finally, at the age of 23, he moved out of his parents' house into a tiny one-bedroom apartment in the city. It wasn't much, just a small space with creaky floors, plain white walls, and a view of the parking lot, but it was his. The feeling of independence was new and exciting, but there was one problem. The apartment was completely empty. He didn't have a single piece of furniture. Over the next few days, Tom searched online for affordable furniture. His budget was tight, so buying new items was out of the question. Instead, he spent hours scrolling through sites like Craigslist looking for cheap or free items. That's when he saw the ad, "Free couch, great condition, must pick up tonight." The picture in the ad showed a large gray couch. It wasn't fancy, but it looked comfortable and clean. Perfect, Tom thought. He quickly called the number on the ad. A man answered after a few rings. "Hello?" The man's voice sounded hesitant, almost nervous. "Hi, I'm calling about the couch. Is it still available?" Tom asked. "Yes, it's still here," the man replied quickly. "But you have to pick it up tonight." "I need it gone." Tom agreed. The man gave him the address and reminded him to bring someone to help move it. After hanging up, Tom called his best friend Jake, who owned a small truck. Jake agreed to help, though he made it clear he wasn't thrilled about moving furniture at night. "Why couldn't you wait until tomorrow?" Jake grumbled as they drove to the address. "The guy said it has to be tonight. Besides, it's free." "I can't pass it up," Tom said, his excitement growing. The address led them to a quiet neighborhood on the edge of town. The street was dimly lit, with only a few streetlights casting long shadows across the road. The house they were looking for was an old two-story building with peeling paint and overgrown bushes. "This place looks sketchy," Jake muttered as he parked the truck. Tom ignored him and walked up to the door. He knocked twice, and after a few moments, the door creaked open. A man in his late 40s stood there. He was thin, with messy hair and tired eyes. "Are you here for the couch?" the man asked quickly, glancing nervously over his shoulder. "Yeah, that's me. I'm Tom," he replied, offering a friendly smile. The man nodded, but didn't introduce himself. Instead, he stepped aside and gestured toward the living room. The couch was there, just like in the picture. It looked a little older in person, but it was still in decent shape. "You can have it. Just take it and go," the man said, his voice tense. Tom and Jake exchanged a look, but didn't ask questions. Together, they lifted the couch and carried it out to the truck. It was heavier than it looked, and the fabric had a strange smell, like dampness mixed with something metallic. Once the couch was loaded, the man quickly closed the door without saying goodbye. "That guy was weird," Jake said as they drove away. "Yeah, but who cares? Free couch." Tom replied with a laugh. When they got back to Tom's apartment, the real challenge began, getting the heavy couch up 3 flights of stairs. It took nearly an hour, and by the time they finally set it down in the living room, both of them were sweaty and exhausted. "Never ask me to help you again," Jake joked, collapsing onto the floor. Tom laughed and sat on the couch. It was surprisingly comfortable, though the strange smell was still there. As he leaned back, his hand brushed against a small tear in the fabric near one of the cushions. "What's this?" Tom muttered, tugging at the tear. The hole widened, revealing something hidden inside the couch. "What are you doing?" Jake asked, sitting up. "There's something in here," Tom said, his curiosity piqued. He reached into the hole and pulled out a black trash bag. It was tied tightly, but the contents felt lumpy and rigid. Tom's excitement turned to unease. "What is this?" "Open it," Jake said, though his voice had a nervous edge. Tom hesitated but untied the bag. Inside were stacks of old photographs, pieces of jewelry, and several small notebooks. The photos were the first thing that caught his attention. Some of them showed smiling families, but others were deeply unsettling. They showed people with frightened expressions, sitting in what looked like a basement. The walls in the background were lined with chains. "This is messed up," Jake said, backing away. Tom's hands shook as he picked up one of the notebooks. Flipping through it, he saw entries written in neat handwriting, describing people and their daily lives. But as he read further, the entries became darker, mentioning things like punishment and no escape. "We need to call the police," Tom said firmly. The police arrived within an hour. 2 officers entered the apartment, and Tom showed them the contents of the trash bags. They examined everything carefully, their expressions growing more serious with each item they pulled out. "This is evidence from a cold case," one of the officers said quietly. "We've been looking for these items for years." Tom's stomach sank. "What kind of case?" "A missing persons case," the officer replied. "Several people disappeared over the last decade, and we believe they were all connected to the same suspect. This couch might have belonged to that person." The officers took the couch and its hidden items as evidence. They also asked Tom and Jake several questions about the man who had given them the couch. Over the next few weeks, the story unfolded. The man who had given Tom the couch was arrested. He turned out to be the prime suspect in a series of kidnappings and murders. The items hidden in the couch were linked to several of the victims, providing crucial evidence that helped solve the case. Tom became something of a local hero. His discovery brought closure to the families of the missing victims, who had been searching for answers for years. But even as people praised him for his role in solving the case, Tom couldn't shake the unsettling feeling that the couch had been waiting for someone to find its secrets. Every time he thought about it, he remembered the strange smell, the nervous man, and the terrifying photos. He was grateful to have helped, but he couldn't help but wonder how many other dark secrets might be hiding in plain sight, waiting to be discovered. The pet sitter job Jessica was a 20-year-old college sophomore studying psychology. She loved animals and often talked about how they were better companions than people. Between balancing her classes, assignments, and social life, Jessica often struggled with money. Tuition, rent, books, and food bills were piling up. She knew she needed a part-time job to make ends meet, but finding one that fit her busy schedule wasn't easy. One evening, while scrolling through Craigslist, she saw an ad that immediately caught her attention. It read, "Pet sitter needed. Rate pay. Flexible hours." The description was brief but intriguing. A kind-hearted dog owner needed someone to care for their dog while they were away for work. The job offered excellent pay, more than Jessica had expected, and only required a few hours of work each week. It sounded like the perfect opportunity. Jessica loved dogs, and she thought, what could go wrong? The next day, she emailed the person behind the ad and introduced herself. A reply came quickly, and within an hour, she had arranged to meet the dog owner, Margaret, at her house to discuss the job. Meeting Margaret and Max, Margaret lived in a quiet, upscale neighborhood about 15 minutes from Jessica's apartment. As Jessica arrived at the house, she admired its charm, a 2-story home with a neatly trimmed lawn, a white picket fence, and flower boxes under the windows. It looked like something out of a magazine. Margaret opened the door with a warm smile. She appeared to be in her late 40s, with short, neatly styled hair and a professional demeanor. Jessica immediately felt at ease. "Thank you for coming, Jessica," Margaret said, ushering her inside. "I travel a lot for work, and I need someone reliable to look after Max. He's a sweetheart, but he does need regular walks and attention." As if on cue, a golden retriever trotted into the room, wagging his tail enthusiastically. Max was big, fluffy, and full of energy. Jessica knelt to pet him, and he licked her hand, instantly winning her over. Margaret gave Jessica a tour of the house, pointing out where Max's food, leash, and toys were kept. She also handed her a typed list of instructions. "I'll be gone for a week at a time," Margaret explained. "You'll need to come by twice a day, once in the morning and once in the evening. Just make sure Max is fed, walked, and comfortable." Before Jessica left, Margaret handed her a spare key and smiled. "Thank you so much, Jessica. I'm sure Max will love you." The first few days, Jessica started the job the following week, and the first few days were a breeze. She enjoyed spending time with Max, who was always excited to see her. Their walks through the quiet neighborhood were peaceful, and Jessica felt a sense of calm she hadn't experienced in a while. Margaret's house was cozy and well kept. Jessica usually stayed for about an hour during each visit, making sure Max was happy and the house was secure before leaving. She noticed that Margaret had a habit of locking certain doors in the house, including the basement door, but she didn't think much of it. Everything seemed perfect, too perfect. The strange door on the fourth evening, as Jessica was about to leave, she noticed something strange. The basement door, which had always been locked, was slightly open. She froze, her mind racing. Did I leave a window open? Could there be someone in the house? She thought. Jessica hesitated, but decided to take a closer look. She pushed the door open and saw a narrow staircase leading down into darkness. Her heart pounded, but curiosity got the better of her. She grabbed her phone, turned on the flashlight, and carefully descended the stairs. The air grew colder with each step. At the bottom, she found herself in a small, dimly lit room. What she saw made her stomach turn. The room was filled with cages. Some were empty, but others contained animal bones and strange tools that Jessica couldn't identify. The walls were covered in disturbing drawings and symbols that looked like they belonged in a horror movie. Jessica's mind raced. What is this place? Why is this here? Does Margaret know about this? Panic sets in. Jessica bolted up the stairs, her hands trembling as she tried to call anyone. She didn't know what to do. Her first thought was to call Margaret, but something about the basement made her uneasy about trusting her employer. Instead, Jessica called the police. "I'm at a house on Oakwood Drive," she stammered. "There's something really strange in the basement. I think it's serious. Please send someone right away." The operator assured her that help was on the way and told her to wait outside. Jessica grabbed Max, who seemed confused but happy to follow her, and sat on the porch, her heart racing. The truth about Margaret. When the police arrived, Jessica explained everything she had seen. They entered the house and went straight to the basement. A few minutes later, one of the officers emerged, his expression grim. "Do you know who Margaret really is?" he asked. Jessica shook her head, confused. The officer explained that the house had been rented under a fake name. Margaret was wanted in several states for animal cruelty and other crimes. The basement was part of her illegal activities, but they hadn't been able to catch her until now. Jessica felt sick. The kind, professional woman she had trusted was nothing like she seemed. Aftermath. Jessica quit pet sitting immediately. The experience left her shaken and paranoid. She couldn't believe how easily she had walked into such a dangerous situation. She also swore off Craigslist and similar job platforms, realizing how risky they could be. For weeks, she had nightmares about the basement and the horrifying things she had seen. Although Max was placed with a loving family, Jessica couldn't shake the guilt of leaving him in Margaret's care for even a moment. From that day on, Jessica was more cautious about trusting strangers. The memory of the perfect pet sitting job that turned into a nightmare stayed with her for a long time. The antique mirror. Emily had always loved old furniture and the stories behind them. She would spend hours browsing online marketplaces and local thrift shops, looking for pieces that had history and character. Her small apartment was filled with vintage chairs, old lamps, and antique picture frames she had collected over the years. To her, these items weren't just things. They were pieces of the past, each with a story to tell. One rainy afternoon, as she sipped tea and scrolled through Craigslist, Emily came across a listing that immediately caught her eye. It was for a beautiful antique mirror with an intricate gold-painted frame. The ornate carvings of flowers and vines were unlike anything she had ever seen before. The seller described it as being from the early 1900s and was offering it for an unbelievably low price. Emily's heart raced. She could already picture it hanging on the wall above her bed, adding a touch of elegance to her room. The description, however, included a strange note. "This mirror has been in my family for generations, but is believed to bring bad luck. Selling as is. Serious buyers only." Emily laughed to herself. She didn't believe in curses or superstitions. It was probably just something the seller had written to make the mirror seem more mysterious. Deciding it was too good a deal to pass up, she contacted the seller right away. The seller, an elderly woman named Mrs. Carter, responded quickly. They arranged for Emily to pick up the mirror the next day. When Emily arrived at the house, she was struck by how old and worn it looked. The paint on the shutters was peeling, and the garden was overgrown with weeds. Mrs. Carter greeted her warmly, but seemed nervous and eager to complete the transaction. The mirror was already waiting by the front door, wrapped in an old blanket. "Are you sure you want this?" Mrs. Carter asked, her voice shaky. "It's a beautiful piece, but I need to warn you again. It's brought nothing but misfortune to my family. My grandmother said it's cursed." Emily smiled politely. "Thank you for the warning, but I'm not worried. It's just a mirror after all." She handed over the cash, loaded the mirror into her car, and drove home feeling triumphant. She couldn't wait to see how it would look in her bedroom. That evening, Emily carefully unwrapped the mirror and admired it. The craftsmanship was stunning, and it seemed to glow faintly in the dim light of her apartment. She cleaned the glass and hung it on the wall above her bed. Stepping back, she admired how perfectly it completed the room. Feeling satisfied, she went to bed with a smile on her face. But from the moment the mirror was in her home, strange things began to happen. At first, it was subtle. Emily felt an odd sensation, as if someone was watching her. She would glance around the room, but saw nothing unusual. Then, her dreams became vivid and unsettling. Night after night, she dreamed of a woman in a long dress, trapped behind the glass of the mirror. The woman's face was pale, her eyes filled with sorrow, and she seemed to be calling out for help. Emily tried to brush it off, telling herself it was just her imagination. But the strange occurrences continued. Objects in her apartment would move on their own. She would leave her keys on the kitchen counter and find them on the coffee table. Her favorite mug mysteriously vanished one morning, only to reappear in the bathroom a week later. And then there were the whispers, soft, faint voices that seemed to come from the direction of the mirror late at night. At first, she thought it might be the wind or her neighbors, but the whispers were too distinct and eerie to ignore. One night, Emily woke up suddenly. Her room was bathed in an eerie, faint glow. She turned her head and saw the mirror shimmering softly, as if it were illuminated from within. Her heart pounded as she got out of bed and walked toward it. As she stared into the glass, her reflection seemed normal at first, but then she noticed something strange. Another figure appeared beside her, a woman she didn't recognize. The woman's lips moved, but no sound came out. Terrified, Emily threw a blanket over the mirror and backed away, her hands shaking. The next day, Emily decided to find out more about the mirror. She contacted a local historian, Mr. Whitaker, who specialized in antiques. She described the mirror and asked if he could help her learn about its history. Intrigued, he agreed to meet with her. When Emily brought the mirror to his office, Mr. Whitaker's eyes widened. "This is an extraordinary piece," he said, examining the frame closely. "The craftsmanship suggests it's from the late 1800s or early 1900s. Mirrors like this were often custom-made for wealthy families. But there's something unusual about it." He pointed to a small engraving on the back of the frame, a series of strange symbols that Emily hadn't noticed before. These markings are not typical. They look like they might be related to folklore or some kind of ritual. Mr. Whitaker did some research and called Emily a few days later. "I found something," he said, his voice serious. "This mirror belonged to a woman named Margaret Holloway. She was a socialite in the early 1900s and was rumored to practice occult rituals. She died under mysterious circumstances, and after her death, strange stories began circulating about the mirror. It's said to be cursed." Emily's stomach sank. She didn't believe in curses, but the strange events in her apartment were hard to ignore. She decided she couldn't keep the mirror any longer. She packed it up and drove back to Mrs. Carter's house, hoping to return it. But when she arrived, she was shocked to find the house abandoned. The windows were boarded up, and it looked like no one had lived there for years. Desperate, Emily tried to sell the mirror online, but every buyer backed out at the last minute. She even considered leaving it on the curb, but she couldn't shake the feeling that it would end up causing harm to someone else. Finally, she contacted a museum known for its collection of haunted artifacts. The curator agreed to take the mirror and promised to keep it in storage far away from the public. Today, the mirror sits in a locked vault in the museum, shrouded in mystery. Emily has moved on, but she still feels uneasy when she thinks about it. She's stopped collecting antiques, preferring new furniture that comes without stories or secrets. Yet sometimes, late at night, she wonders about the woman in the mirror and whether she'll ever find peace. The too good to be true apartment, Mark and Lisa had been together for 3 years and were ready to take the next step in their relationship, moving in together. They had spent months saving up and were excited about finding their first apartment. Living in the city was a dream for both of them, but it wasn't easy. Apartments were either too expensive, too small, or located in neighborhoods that didn't feel safe. Despite the challenges, they kept looking, convinced they would eventually find the perfect place. One day, while browsing through Craigslist, Mark stumbled upon a listing that seemed almost too good to be true. It was for a spacious 2-bedroom apartment in a prime location, close to shops, restaurants, and public transportation. The photos showed a modern kitchen with stainless steel appliances, a cozy living room, and a balcony with an amazing view of the city skyline. The rent? Far cheaper than anything else they had seen in that area. Mark immediately showed the listing to Lisa, who was just as stunned as he was. "This can't be real," she said, furrowing her brow. "How can it be so cheap?" Mark shrugged. "Maybe the landlord just wants to rent it out quickly. It's worth checking out, right?" After a bit of back and forth, they decided to contact the landlord. They sent an email expressing their interest and received a reply within an hour. The landlord, a man named Mr. Johnson, said he would be happy to meet them and show them the apartment. He explained that he was looking for reliable tenants and was offering a discount because he valued long-term renters who would take care of the property. Mark and Lisa were skeptical but hopeful. They scheduled a meeting for the following evening. The next day, Mark and Lisa arrived at the apartment building. It was even more impressive in person. The building looked well maintained, and the lobby had a clean, modern design. Mr. Johnson greeted them with a warm smile. He was a middle-aged man, neatly dressed, and spoke in a calm and friendly manner. He explained that he had inherited the property from his late father and wanted to rent it to people who would treat it with respect. As they toured the apartment, Mark and Lisa couldn't believe their luck. The place was everything they had hoped for and more. The kitchen was spacious, the bedrooms were bright, and the balcony offered a stunning view of the city. Mr. Johnson answered all their questions and seemed genuinely interested in making sure they would be comfortable. "I'll need the first month's rent and a security deposit up front," he said. "But once that's settled, the apartment is yours." Mark and Lisa exchanged a quick look. They didn't want to lose this opportunity. Without much hesitation, they handed over the money and signed the lease. Mr. Johnson gave them the keys and wished them luck in their new home. Moving day came quickly. Mark and Lisa were thrilled as they unpacked their boxes and set up their furniture. They couldn't stop talking about how perfect the apartment was. It felt like a dream come true. For the first few days, everything was great. The apartment was quiet, the neighbors were friendly, and the location was incredibly convenient. Mark and Lisa spent their evenings on the balcony, enjoying the view and planning their future together. But then, strange things started happening. It began with small, easily dismissed incidents. Late at night, they would hear faint footsteps in the hallway. At first, they assumed it was a neighbor or someone passing through. But as the days went on, the footsteps grew louder and more frequent. What made it even stranger was that they were the only tenants on their floor. "Maybe it's the building settling," Mark suggested one night as they sat in the living room. "Old buildings make weird noises sometimes." Lisa nodded, but she couldn't shake the uneasy feeling in her stomach. She had lived in old buildings before, and this felt different. Then, other odd things began to happen. Doors that they were sure they had closed would be open when they came back into the room. Items like keys, wallets, and even kitchen utensils would disappear. only to reappear in strange places. One morning, Lisa found her hairbrush in the freezer. "Okay, this is getting weird," she said, holding up the frozen brush. "Did you put this here?" Mark shook his head. "Why would I do that?" They tried to laugh it off, but the incidents continued, each one more unsettling than the last. One evening, while Lisa was cleaning the bedroom, she noticed something unusual about the smoke detector on the ceiling. It seemed slightly out of place, as if it had been tampered with. Curious, she grabbed a chair and stood on it to get a closer look. When she opened the cover, her heart dropped. Inside was a tiny camera, its lens pointing directly at the bed. "Mark!" she screamed, jumping down from the chair. Mark ran into the room, alarmed. "What? What happened?" Lisa held up the smoke detector. "There's a camera in here." Mark's face went pale. He took the detector from her and examined it closely. This can't be real. Who would do this?" They immediately began searching the apartment. They checked every smoke detector, light fixture, and vent. By the time they were done, they had found 5 hidden cameras scattered throughout the apartment, each one carefully concealed. Panicked, they called the police. When the officers arrived, they conducted a thorough investigation. After examining the cameras and the lease documents, they uncovered the shocking truth. Mr. Johnson wasn't the real landlord. He had somehow gained access to the apartment and was using it to spy on unsuspecting tenants. The officers assured Mark and Lisa that they would do everything they could to catch Mr. Johnson. In the meantime, they advised the couple to leave the apartment immediately. Mark and Lisa packed up their belongings and left that same night. They stayed with friends while they searched for a new place. The experience left them shaken and deeply distrustful of online listings. They couldn't believe how close they had come to being victims of such a horrifying scheme. In the weeks that followed, they shared their story online and warned others to be cautious when renting apartments. Their post went viral, and many people reached out to thank them for raising awareness. Some even shared similar experiences, revealing just how common such scams could be. Though the ordeal had been traumatic, Mark and Lisa were grateful to have escaped before things got worse. They learned valuable lessons about trusting their instincts and being vigilant. When they finally found a new apartment, they made sure to verify everything thoroughly before signing the lease. The experience changed them forever, but it also brought them closer together. They knew they could face anything as long as they had each other.